Well, this is our second part of the conversation with Gwil Roberts, who's with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. He is the director of the Big Bar Landslide Response team. We had a great first conversation, and we'll pick it up now with Gwil.
Our data was also showing us all along that this slide was going to continue to cause problems for us into 2020. The sheer volume of material that landed in the river, we're talking, up to 80,000 cubic meters of rock landed in the river, and there's just not enough time to get in there and remove it. Even if we'd had many more months of low water, it's still, this is a huge impediment to us. So a number of systems were put in place to provide alternatives. When our suspicions were confirmed that natural salmon passage is probably not likely in 2020, now what are we going to do? We need to plan for, we need to hope for the best, but we need to plan for the worst. And that's where the next series of systems have been put in place.
So where we stand right now, May of 2020, the blasting has had to stop, I'm assuming because of the water flows. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, yeah. High water has risen, and we're what we call the in-river works have been completed. Correct.
So that is it possible that blasting will have to occur again then down the road, or is it a kind of a assess and then decide?
It's highly likely that more blasting and more rock removal is
Gotcha.
In the works for us. Yes, that's what we anticipate.
Well, that's really helpful, Gwil. And so now tell us a bit about what you're doing. Blasting's got to be done. What else are you doing to help those fish get past the obstruction? I mean, we talked about the helicopters and the truck and trap, as it's called, from last year. These are not ideal solutions, as you said. So what else is being explored, or what else is being implemented to help the fish get beyond the obstruction?
Yeah, so there are three systems that we're putting in place. The first one has happened already. It happened before the higher water arrived on scene, and that was the installation of what we call a nature-like fishway. So this is a bench about 4 meters wide. It spans the full length of the canyon where we have the constriction, and the nature-like fishway is the strategic placement of large size boulders in a sequence at a particular grade that allow fish to move up on their own effort. So this nature-like fishway was specifically designed. It required the careful placement of these boulders. We're talking boulders that are about 2 meters in diameter. And basically the idea there is, as the fish arrive at the site, they will be able to move up this side of the river. The water flows are slightly less strong on the west side of the Fraser at this point. And then the nature-like fishway will aid their passage. They'll be able to move up, stop, rest, and then move up some more, and hopefully will under their own effort, this will get them to the other side. So that's the one system, the nature-like fishway, and we estimate that it will allow salmon will be able to move up to about 3,500 CMS for volume here. They'll be able to use that feature.
Okay. And you said there were three, so that's one. What else?
There were three, yes. So the second is probably many viewers know or have heard of pneumatic fish pump system. So
the cannon,
Innovations,
the fish cannon.
Well, yeah, it's
suffer the thought of salmon being shot through a cannon.
Yeah, and it's I think popular culture, people gravitate to this idea of a cannon. It's certainly not a cannon. That's not what we have procured. So we've entered into an agreement with Whoosh Innovations out of Seattle, and they are supplying a Whoosh portal system, and that fish pass it's a pneumatic fish pump that will be moving the fish up over the slide. Very impressive piece of gear with a it has sophisticated components to it, and it relies on a tube system to move the fish over the slide. So the fish will be will move up into the whoosh system, and then they will be scanned and sorted, and they'll move into one of the tubes that best fits their size. And then it's 160 meters that they will travel through these tubes and be deposited on the other end. So it's a gentle measure. We have high hopes for its success. It will be operated whenever we're viewing salmon that haven't been able to cross over under their own steam, and it requires itself, again, because we're in this rugged, remote location, a lot of planning and a lot of logistics in order to install a system of this size.
Wow.
So a lot of planning has gone into where its placement. We have to consider the requirements for power, for water, and for the air supply for the system. And then we also have to look at the tubes themselves, how to suspend those tubes up and across the canyon. Because once they are filled with fish, they're very heavy. Yeah. And they need to be properly suspended, and the run needs to be at again, you have to be careful on the grade of those tubes. Absolutely. And then at the terminal end, what does it look like? So this has been a major undertaking, and we're well on the way to achieving, I think, that installation. So that operation will happen in early June. And one other element here, which I think is important to mention, is how to move the fish from the river to the entry point to the whoosh. Yes. Because that will require handling. We want to minimize the handling. Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's why we built. Sorry to interrupt. I did not realize that element, but it makes sense now that you're talking about it, that you can't just expect the fish to funnel into this. You actually have to gently handle those fish and place them into the pneumatic tube.
That's right. Yes. I mean, and there's an elevation gain here. So where the fish are down at river level to where the whoosh needs to be above high water. And so that's why we built a fish ladder, a particular local fish ladder. So a lot of people think, well, is that a fish ladder to get the fish over the slide? No, it's a fish ladder to move the fish up to a holding pen, a holding area. And from there, they will move into the whoosh and through the tubes to the other side of the slide side. So that's the key behind that fish ladder. Quite an undertaking itself. Over 500 large concrete blocks were used to build that fish ladder. It is complete now. The other consideration here is that water needs to be pumped down the fish ladder. So there's a fairly sophisticated requirement for water pumps on site as well.
Gwil, just before we leave the fish pneumatic device, the fish cannon, as people are calling it, is this a historic use of this type of technology? Have they ever had to go this far of a distance with salmon using this type of device?
The distance I don't think is so much of an issue as the remoteness of the installation. So creating a suitable platform, arranging for power. You need a certain amount of diesel generation here. Then we're needing to fuel these generators as well, and then also supply water to the system. So that has been more of a challenge. When you have an area where there's been a dam, for example, or a purposeful installation of a dam, and then a whoosh system can be used there. Well, you have access to power, and you have access to the for example, for the installation of the tubes. For us, we had to suspend the tubes in a canyon over top of a river that's now in full motion. So we've had to build a walkway so we can continue to install the hangars. And now you don't have a nice smooth concrete wall. We're installing a suspension system, a hanging system in the side of a cliff. So that is tricky on its own right. But yeah, so we're again, I think that's been more of the issue rather than the distance or the length of the transport.
And how is Mother Nature cooperating this year in terms of flow? I've heard that it's a fairly significant freshet this year.
It is a significant freshet this year. One of the reasons for that is the snowpack is higher than normal. We're looking at statistical norms where statistical averages for snowpack were in the 130% to the 140% range in this part of the Cariboo. So that's a problem. That means there's that much more water up and trapped in the snowpacks, and it will come down. What we've had for those listeners or the viewers in the interior of BC, they well know that there's been tremendous amount of water coming into the streams and the rivers over the past month that's caused damage and flooding. This has happened in Cache Creek. It's happened in Prince George. And we've had the same spike in water levels at the Big Bar site.
Okay.
It did not significantly impact us. It did require us to readjust for 3 or 4 days. But what we're seeing now is water levels actually have declined back to more normal levels. There's been a bit of a cool spell that's allowed that. But again, the other side of this is that there's only so much water that can come down from the snowpack. And as a result, if we move more of that water before the fish arrive, that's actually a bit of a benefit to us. But it is a concern. Yes, Mother Nature definitely has thrown us some curveballs.
Yeah. And another curveball, of course, that we're all dealing with is coronavirus.
That's correct, yes.
Which I imagine you've had to, did that suspend work for any period of time?
The COVID-19 has not hit us as hard as it certainly could have. We've been very fortunate. Kiewit, the prime contractor, continued work. There was no stoppage of work due to the viral pandemic. There were strict measures put in place to protect workers. And this included, a whole new level of concern over social distancing and how crews interacted, transporting crews, keeping their distance. It meant that the number of people traveling in a truck was greatly reduced. You would only have 2 people. They would be sitting at opposite sides, one in the front, one in the back, one in the other corner. Sorry, so one in the front driving and one in the back corner. Those types of considerations. So all of a sudden, we needed to have a lot more trucks on site, and Kiewit was able to accommodate that. I mean, so they put in place a very rigorous plan to protect their workers, and it has succeeded. They have been able to protect their crews and all of the subcontractors that work at the site, and work has continued at a very strong pace.
Yeah, safety takes on so many configurations in this Herculean context. I can only imagine. And you mentioned, of course, Gwil, that there's the requirement with the pneumatic device, for example, of moving the fish, and then they'll come out the other end. I'm assuming there'll need to be people monitoring both ends, the open end and then the end where the fish come out, and just monitoring in general of all of this, these mitigations that have been put in place. Give me a sense of the staff component and the monitoring component that's going to need to go on as you begin to put these measures into place.
Yeah, so monitoring is a key element here, and we will have, in order to have a full understanding of the success of our systems and to understand what fish are arriving on site, how many need to be moved, how many are moving on their own. There are a series of monitoring programs planned and in place going into operation right now at Big Bar. So with regards specifically to the whoosh system, you are correct. There needs to be crews that are maintaining and operating the system, that are making sure that it is working as planned, and that our fish are moving through and are being deposited at the other end in a gentle manner. So that is an ongoing monitoring piece on its own. And there are also, there's certain technology as well that's telling us how many, the system will indicate how many fish are moving and their rate, and it will show, any problems as well. So I think that is well in hand. Other parts of the monitoring program are to measure the arrival of fish at the Big Bar site. So that is a two-phase piece. We have hydroacoustic monitoring using sonar systems. So those are set up at different locations along the Fraser. That's been a part of the Fisheries and Oceans monitoring program for many years, but obviously gets stepped up here to understand what fish are arriving. And then there's a tagging system as well. So fish are actually removed, they're tagged, and then they're put back into the river, and that is a representation of what's happening with individual fish. And there's a very large tagging program that we're funding here to understand how the fish are getting across the slide, and then their arrival back in at their home streams, in their natal streams.
Now, I don't want to go too far in the weeds here, Gwil, with salmon speak, but we may have some people watching who aren't familiar with what it means to tag a salmon. So can you give us the Cliff Notes or Cole's Notes version of what that means to tag a salmon?
Well, first you've got to get your hands on one, I guess, for lack of a better term. So, there is netting and angling options here. The tags themselves are very sophisticated. They're expensive pieces of gear, and you need to apply some sedative as well to the fish, and then they're gently put back into the river, into the streams, and they're on their way. So obviously, what's important is we understand what species we've removed, its characteristics are logged, and all of that information is kept. And then the monitoring programs as well. Obviously, it's all software driven, and that is going to show us where and when these fish are migrating.
We could probably have a whole episode just on technology and salmon tagging, which maybe we should do down the road. But
absolutely,
technology has really advanced the ability to monitor and to observe salmon, hasn't it?
It has, yes, yeah, and this is certainly, I think we're at the very much at the front end. Fisheries and Oceans is extremely capable in this area. We're adopting and adjusting the best practices that we think are required here. So it's a fascinating part of our program, and it involves many moving pieces, as you can imagine, a lot of different technology, and we're also the monitoring piece also has a collaborative effort. So we work very closely with First Nations up and down the Fraser River who assist and work on the front lines with our monitoring program. Great.
Well, indeed, that was my last question for you, Gwil. This is, I know, but I'd like you to tell those that are watching, this is not, Fisheries and Oceans certainly deserves a lot of credit for this Herculean response, the federal government, but there are other levels of government. There are many partners. This is collaborative. Tell us more about who else is involved in this effort.
Well, we have, exactly, Mike. We have strong relationships, and first of all, the Pacific Salmon Foundation is a strong supporter and certainly a collaborative partner, and has been working with us on the Big Bar problem since it began. So that's been a very good example of a close relationship that's assisted with success here. First Nations. Well, absolutely.
I wasn't looking for the pat on the back, but thank you.
Well, no, we appreciate the help and the support. We really do. First Nations are strongly connected to Fisheries and Oceans work, and with the Big Bar response, that has been an ongoing relationship that we've been very proud of. We work with the First Nations that are resident up and down the Fraser, so there are upwards of 140 different First Nations along the Fraser River, and they're also represented by a number of groups and agencies that we interact with, and we're very proud of that relationship. We rely heavily on First Nations to assist us and make our programs a success. At the same time, we're very closely connected too with the province of BC. The province is a significant funder here. They provide a lot of the funding as well that's helped with the Big Bar response, and their engineers and expertise and their knowledge of the land has been instrumental in the success we've had to date. And then there's a large variety of stakeholders as well, other agencies that interact with us, other boards and other committees. So for all of that help, we're very appreciative, and we look forward to continuing those relationships.
Well, Gwil, we've covered a lot of territory, and I really appreciate you taking all of this time. Is there anything you wanted to get out there that I didn't ask you, or anything important information that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
We're very interested in providing updates to the public, and there is a weekly information bulletin that is published by Fisheries and Oceans with input of the province and First Nations. So we're also very intent on putting as many photos and video into that publication as well, and providing the type of input and update that I believe the public really needs and deserves. So please stay connected with us, and we're very happy to provide that information and to continue to update organizations and individuals as time progresses.
And Gwil, you are always welcome here on our show. We'd love to have you back after the summer to hear how things went. We're all crossing our fingers and pulling for you and the entire team there that's working very hard on this. It really is a major undertaking, and obviously investment by the province, the federal government, and First Nations, and all for the good of our Pacific salmon. So thank you very much for all of your work. And we'll wrap up this edition of Salmon Matter. We've been joined today by Gwil Roberts. He's the director of the Big Bar Landslide Response Team for Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Gwil, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Mike. Much appreciated. Look forward to meeting again.
You bet. And thank you to all of you who have tuned in. We'll have more episodes to come. And of course, thank you to our donors, our supporters. We work very closely with many partners, federal government, provincial government, First Nations, and hundreds of community organizations. Thank you to everyone who cares for Pacific salmon and does the heavy lifting to ensure their conservation and restoration for the future. For now, thank you very much and stay well.